There you go, I think.
I think so.
I'd like to call to order the meeting to discuss the 2016-17 budget and ask our treasurer, Bobby Joe Felt, to lead us in the pledge.
Oh,
I say Hail Mary.
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm sorry, I will just never forget that.
is the camera on?
All right, I'll get this started.
But
And-
before you do, I just want to make a statement that this is a workshop for our council members. You're welcome to be here with us, but I won't be taking any questions from the audience. There'll be a public hearing before the budget is passed and finalized. So thank you for coming. And now you can.
Okay, what I wanted to do was to go over some of the process and some of the highlights of this particular budget. As you know, or you don't know, we start this budget process in January. And basically, what I do is in January, I send out an email to everybody to remind them that it's time to prepare to get the budget going. What happens next is within a short time later, the treasurer, Bobby Joe, sends out an email that has the forms that they fill out, all the department heads fill out. And based upon that, there's also a schedule that's developed, and we follow that schedule. The next thing that happens in the process is Bobby Joe and I meet with each of the department heads, and we go over the budget and all the capital items as well. That process takes probably about 3 or 4 days, maybe even 5. Then after we've gotten through that process, then Bobby Joe goes off and she puts all of that information together and puts it into the format you see in front of you. The next step in that particular process is Bobby Joe and I meet with the mayor, and he gets out his red pen and he starts chopping away. And after that particular process is done, again, Bobby Joe goes back and she, takes the blood and mixes it and puts it into the format you see here tonight. So you have a copy of the original budget that was sent to you vis-a-vis email that Bobby Joe and I put together. You also have the copy of the changes that the mayor had, so you can take a look at the two, the difference between the two. In this particular budget that we have right now before you, some of the things that are notable is that, number one, we are still using the same tax rate that we did last year, and that's 37 cents. And that will produce a yield to us of $82,000. And the good news, too, is that we are only going to have to increase the utility fund by 3.5% to $7.63 from $7.37. And the same with the sewer would go from $14.99 from $14.48. I'm sorry, it would go to $14.49 from $14.48. Now, having said that, this budget that you have before you is one of the best ones we've had in about 6 years, from the standpoint that we are no longer, two things. Number one, we are no longer taking money, and Fund 1, the general fund, is no longer subsidizing the water and sewer rates. It's completely out. The second thing is that you will note that there's a little bit of a surplus that, you know, at the end of the year on the utility fund. So this is the first time that we've actually seen a positive in a long time, which, what that means, in my opinion, is that the Davenport process and report that we asked for and their methodology is working. And one of the other comments on this is that the mayor has also included a 1.5% COLA across the board for everybody. This budget that you have before you here is, again, contains no growth in either Fund 1 or Fund 2. And at a later date, what I really want to talk to the council about is the previous year's budget and that we've gotten the audit from, and taking a look at what to do with that money that's there. There is money there. And my recommendation is going to be, and is, that we take that money and we put it into a restricted fund so that we can put that towards capital projects. So with that, that basically covers the summary of all that we've had, and we'll move on. And I'm going to turn this mic back over to Bobby Joe, who has all the data. And how do you wish to proceed? Is either line by line or just questions?
I think in past years, we've kind of just summarized each section and asked if there were any questions regarding any particular item, and we'll continue to do it that way this year unless someone would rather do it another way. But I think that is expedient. Most of the stuff is self-explanatory. A lot of the figures that you'll see are duplicated from fund to fund to fund, or from department to department to department, so you don't have to keep rehashing those over and over again. So Bobby Joe, if you can just kind of take the lead and just guide us through the page by page, I think, and just kind of summarize what you see there. The cover page is pretty self-explanatory. Henry has already touched on a number of items on that page. Does anybody have any questions on that before we move over? Move on, I guess.
Could you just very briefly explain the COLA increase?
So the cost of living adjustment is 1.5% increase, so it's not based on performance evaluations. That, of course, will affect retirement, workers' comp, payroll taxes accordingly. And so that's a straight 1.5% across the board.
Are you on page 2 of 19?
Yes.
Okay, I have some questions.
I was, just to comment on Joe's comment, I was very conscious of very conscious of having to continue to draw from reserves, and I wanted to try to avoid that as much as possible. To take money out of savings account to fund things that we don't need to fund, and that's why I allowed for the cost of living increase. But it's the economy's austere, and so should our cost of living increase be austere. Okay, Don, you were going to say something?
Yeah, on page 2 of 19, there's a category under salary increase where the COLA is. The next one is a reorganization category, and I have a number of concerns about it and questions. This says that the city manager and treasurer previously allocated 100% of the general fund will now have salary and fringe benefits 50% from the general fund to the utility fund. Now, as you know, I emailed everybody in the group requests to have water and sewer equity and to look at. But this says that there's a reorganization that shifts the 100% from the general fund to 50% to the utility fund. When we did our calculations, and you helped us so much with statistics, we had good data from you about the 2018 15 utility fund balances, and I had studied that in detail. So I'm concerned about the shift to the utility fund. The argument's made, I think, on page 14, why that might have been done. Then it says 2 employees in the finance department were 100% from general fund, now become water and sewer billing. So 2 of the employees that we have are changed to water and sewer billing, and then it says 90% of their fee will be from the utility fund. Then it says 2 employees in Public Works Department were 100% in the general fund, now 30% from the general fund and 70% to the utility fund. And then it says Public Works Department fringe benefits allocated with payroll departments will now be allocated on a labor distribution percentage between funds.
We were inappropriately subsidizing the utility workers' salaries from the general fund. We're not supposed to do that, so this makes it right. Just corrects our mistake or our error.
Yeah, well, we were trying to get utility fund balances to attempt to give
Yeah,
relief for the
each-
water and sewer rates.
Don-
We didn't want to burden additional costs to the utility fund that were actually costs.
Each fund has to stand on its own. Prior to this budget, it's not been able to do that. What we've accomplished is the fact that we've been able to do that. We don't have to subsidize, the taxpayers don't have to subsidize the water and sewer department. It has to come out of, it has to come out of the fees that are charged for the services that are rendered. That's the way the charter works.
Well, I
have to pay
understand
that bill
the meaning of your words, but that's not what this says. What this says is that the city manager and the treasurer are now going to be 50% out of this utility fund.
That's because a portion of their time is spent dealing with water and sewer issues.
Yeah, 50, and then 2 employees in the finance department, 90% is going to be out of the water and sewer fund, the utility fund.
That's because a good deal of their time is spent with water and sewer issues.
I also noticed on page 14, it says $2,800 in office supplies is going to be part of the water and sewer bill, and $200 in cash payments is going to be part of the water and sewer bill, and $500 of training is going to be
all
part of
those-
the water and sewer bill, and 55 of the overtime costs of these people are going to be part of the water and sewer bill.
That's the calculations that have been arrived at to determine what value they should be paying toward the water and sewer should be paying toward their services.
Yeah, when we, Mr. Mayor, when we did our calculations about the potential to give relief to citizens on water and sewer bill, we were within $100,000 on that. But if you shift these management costs over onto the.
I just said that we were subsidizing the water and sewer department. We can't subsidize the water and sewer department. We gotta make it right.
Well, I
That's
just
what we're
don't believe
doing.
it. I don't believe the city manager and the treasurer should have you 50%. They ought to be back in the general fund where they should be, and these staffers
You
should be
don't
back
think
in
the
the general
city,
fund.
the city manager and the treasurer spend any time with water and sewer issues?
Oh, I do think so.
I would say they
especially
said
since I got elected.
75% of the time with water and sewer issues.
Yeah, I do think so. I
It's
agree.
probably 25% too low.
Yeah, well, I'm concerned about the shifting to the, if you were looking for relief in 2016, you wouldn't be able to achieve it if you shifted a lot of costs into the utility fund.
We'd
that
have to
weren't previously
falsify the
there.
records again. We
It's
don't
not
want to do that
falsifying the
anymore.
record. This is a change. It says a reorganization and reallocations done in the proposed budget. The heading, Mr. Mayor, says fiscal year 2017 budget assumptions. So this is a change from the way it is now to the way it will be in the future,
Can I take-
shifting these costs into the utility fund.
Did you have something?
Yes, Councilman Frazier, you came in late and you missed the beginning of this, where we even talked about the fact that this particular year, we are only going to be increasing the water and the sewer rates by 3.5%, which is much less than what the Davenport report said we could do, if you recall. So we have already lowered that. So with lowering that, if you had looked at this thing, you would have seen also
Well,
that
I've
that's,
looked at it. I
well,
have many, many notes to bring up.
well, you would have also seen that the utility fund, even doing all this, still has a surplus. So, I'm sorry you missed the first part of it.
Well, I don't think I missed the point that I wanted to bring up and emphasize today, that these costs are being shifted from the general fund into the utility fund.
Which is good business.
Thank you, Councilman, that's a good observation. Bobby Joe, do you want to proceed with the review of the budget from this point forward then?
Any other questions on the budget notes on page 2? If not, we can move to page 3, and page 3 is a summary as well as page 4. Page 3, the only difference between the two is we just give you the FY16 comparison to FY17. So on page 3, on the left side, the general fund, you'll notice this year we had to use $148,000 of fund balance to balance the budget this year, compared to last year, $385,000. And then on the utility side, on the right-hand side, we do not have to use any fund balance this year, where last year, FY16, we had to use $55,000 to balance the budget. And in FY17, which Henry alluded to, is we are having $12,000 in surplus projected. And this is with no growth included in the budget. So,
The thing about the money we're taking from savings, that $32,000, there is no growth projected, but growth does occur. The funds that we receive from water and sewer connections, from extra fees that we collect from new residents, goes into that fund that Henry was talking about at the beginning. So there'll be money there that essentially increases the fund balance and is then taken out in this side right here. So it's kind of a wash. It's actually, we end up, we collect more fees than we're spending out of, so we're not losing anything from our savings account, is what I'm saying.
Bobby Joe, this $32,219,
yes.
that's a minus.
Yes, but that's your, that's just your difference column. That's the difference between the FY17 budget and the FY16 budget.
Likewise, the 6,800.
Correct.
Okay.
So in that column, the third column, FY17 minus FY16, those are your differences between the 2 years. So you'll see in the red, like finance department, there's a difference of $131,000, city manager $35,000, streets $127,000. That's the shifting of mainly the salaries and fringe benefits over to the utility fund for the actual allocation of where they're working, which is in the utility fund, where before the general fund was subsidizing their salaries and fringe benefits. So that's the bulk of that negative column. That's not all of it, but that's the bulk of what has been shifted over to the utility fund.
Yeah, I had a question. How much of this is wages and how much is fringe benefits that's shifted over to the utility fund?
I may have that here. If not, I'll have to get that to you.
And then while I have the floor, the line just above that, budget use of fund balance, is $385,099 to $148,289, which is a deficit of $239,810. Maybe you could address why it's such a substantial change for fiscal year 2017.
Again, that has to do with the salaries and the fringe benefits.
That's what I thought.
And capital projects also plays a role in there. So your first question was fringe benefits, correct?
Yeah, I want to
How
take
much
some notes
was
on that, if you
moved?
have that data there.
That percentage should be consistent throughout the pages that we review, the percentage of fringe benefits to salaries.
don't have that in a percentage format for you. I have dollar amounts. So for salaries, approximately 251,000. That's for salaries. For health insurance, approximately 78,000. And of course, there's other things like pension, admin costs, workers' comp, but they're a much smaller scale.
Pension, admin, and what was the third one you said?
Workers' comp.
Workman's comp, that's right, I heard you say that. Thank you.
Any other questions on that? And any other questions on page 3? Moving on to page 4, again, it's pretty much the same thing, except there's no more comparison. It's just a snapshot of just FY17 budget only. And if there's no questions there, we'll move on to page.
Well, just one question comes to mind, Bobby Joe.
Yes.
It looked like, as I studied through this, that we weren't actually getting actual 2015 numbers, but just the estimates that were made from the budget for 2015. Can we get actual numbers instead of the estimate numbers?
For
Actual expenditures, because that's all finished, and we should have that.
For FY15?
Yeah.
Yes, we didn't do that. We did FY16 budget.
Yeah, which would be estimates, but we actually know what was spent in 15.
Yes. In the original email, I think that Henry sent out had the comparison, not in this format, but it was a PDF file document from FY13 through FY16. And those were provided to
I
you.
saw a comparison on that.
Yes. It's just not in this
What
same
we're looking
format.
for at here is those 2016 estimates that were made at that time.
What page are we on?
Just a question on page 4.
So page 4 is just the FY17. And I think Don was asking for FY15 actuals. And we don't have that in this format.
There's no 15
No,
numbers
but we
on
have
there.
it in the PDF that was sent out before. Yes. And we actually provided FY13 actuals, 14 and 15 actuals, FY16 to about March 10th, I think it was, and then the FY16 budget.
All right.
Okay.
Questions on page 4, further questions on page 4. These next pages will get into the meat of things.
Yes, this is a new one we did this year on page 5. It was helping us distinguish between capital projects, capital equipment, our principal payments versus our operating expenditures, and also separating out our grant revenue and what revenue is going to cover the capital projects. So that's why we put this spreadsheet together. So the format is a little different. Usually you're used to seeing revenues over top of expenditures. In this format, you're seeing revenues to the left, then your operating expenditures, then giving you a net balance. And then we go into capital budget revenues, where the money's coming from for the capital projects, if any, or we're using fund balance. And then we separate out our capital equipment, which is anything over 5,000 or more. And then we go into our capital projects, building improvements and infrastructure. Then we go into our capital principal debt payments. So you'll see for the general fund, our principal payments for FY17 will be $109,000. For water and sewer, the principal payments will be $678,000. The interest is included in the operating budget. Then we get our total expenditures for capital. Again, we get the net revenue over expenditures and then the total. And then the last column, we've just added full-time equivalent for the employees because of all the allocations we did. This is based on an employee working 2,080 hours. And so you'll see now the full-time equivalent taking their hours of approximately how much time they'll be working in that department. And so the total number of full-time equivalent is equal to 43.49.
Bobby, one question. Under the debt payments, this 678,000 is not the total, right? Because that does not include the interest?
It does not include the interest.
Okay.
The interest is in the operating budget, and that you can see in the detail. And when we
Okay.
get to that, I'll point that out.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was understood, that that's
Yes.
not the total payment.
That is just the principal.
Okay, a question here. Under the city manager, it says $74,012 expenditures operating request. But then over under FTE, full-time equivalents, it only says .7. And I thought our city manager was a full-time employee. Why doesn't it say 1.0 like it does for the IT and the clerk and the zoning?
So what happened is, when we did the reallocation and reorganization, there's 3 employees in the city manager. It's 2 of the water and sewer billing specialists, plus the city manager, which equals 3 employees. But because the city manager will only have 50% of his time allocated in the general fund, 50% allocated in the water and sewer, that's your .50. Then for each of the 2 other employees, only 10% of their time is in the general fund. So there's your .1 and .1, so .5, .1, .1 is .7.
So you shifted 50% of the city manager's job into the utility fund, and then the FTE for the city manager is .7, so that means only 0.2% of the time the rest of the time is working with the town?
No.
No, it's 3 employees.
Try it again.
Yep, 3 employees,
Well,
so,
why is the FTE not 1.0 like it does with other full-time employees?
because the other 2 employees only 10% of their time will be allocated in the general fund. So,
They are under city manager, so you have
Right.
.5 of his time and .1 of each of their time equals .7. It's 3 people in that line.
Right. Not just the city manager.
no, it was only originally 1. Now it will be 3, but their time allocated, only 1.3 of their time is gonna be in the utility fund, and .7 is in the general fund.
Which means if we were to look at this in the utility fund, it would be, what, 2.4? 2.3? 5,
Point,
yeah.
.9, or 90, and
.5.
.5, correct.
But I thought it was important to include that full-time equivalent this year, and because of the allocations, they can
Right.
get quite
It shows us a
complex.
lot.
So I needed to do that for all the allocations for workers' comp. Everything is allocated differently than what we're used to seeing.
Okay.
And Bobby Joe, under finance, the 1.13, I guess that would include the new position.
Yes, so the new position, I think it came out to .63, because 25 hours a week, multiply that out, it's only 63% of a 2,080 full year hours. And then because of 50% of my time is going over to water and sewer. So that's the reduction there.
Thank you.
So instead of 2 employees, it's 1.13, full-time equivalent.
Thank you.
Okay.
So moving on to page 6. This is what you guys are used to, which is all the detail. And I won't go line by line. I'll just do some highlights and then before I move on to the next page, if there's any questions. So the format here is the, whether it's tax revenue, county revenue, et cetera, and whether it pertains to a specific department or our actual revenue general ledger codes. The main one we first have on there is the real estate taxes. And you'll notice that the budgeted amount compared to last year nets us at $82,000 more. There has been question on why that is so high, and if you remember, last year we did not raise our rate. So we kept it lower than what we could have. So that's why you're seeing over 82,000 when you're probably only expecting like 31,000 there. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it's probably about $50,000 we left on the table last
Yes.
year.
Next one down, corporate business tax. We are forecasting a slightly higher amount to come in there. Also state income tax. And in our agreement with the county, the very bottom line, tax differential, we're looking at a net increase of about $5,500. And those are the highlights on this page. So in general, on this page, we are looking at increase in revenue. And I have noted some comparisons there for you if you need to know that, like what came in FY 13, 14, and 15 to justify the amount we budgeted. And that is coming from that PDF that was sent to you a couple weeks ago with all that detail in it.
Well, one quick question for the town-county agreement revenue. There was some money that would be coming out of that this coming year too, right?
Yes, so the stormwater project funding of $59,000 will be coming out, which is already taken out of there, as well as over $6,000 for the MPDES, and I believe that is for cost sharing of an employee.
So that we really were paid out pretty good.
Even though that is being taken out, we are still netting more revenue.
And that was what I was curious about. Thank you.
Any other questions on this page?
Just one comment, even though it is more money, it's still $65,000 or so less than what it should have been.
Yes.
Okay. If we didn't have to worry about the storm management, then we'd have had 65,000 more in that pot.
Page 7. Page 7 is additional revenue. The highlights here, our state police protection grant will receive about $2,000 more. Our parking fines are up, so we budgeted $2,500 more. Our state highway user revenue, we're expecting about $18,000 more. And we do have new rental income coming in for the Parks and Recreation for the Garrett property, for renting that out, $1,600 a year. Any comments on this page? Page 8. This is the last page of the revenue for the general fund. The main comment here is on the grants. Towards the bottom of the page, you'll see a net $19,000 reduction, and that is, we're receiving less grant money for the street light LED retrofit. Bottom line, it's pretty much a wash, grants, money coming in, expenses going out. For this year, we may have a small amount, maybe $3,000, $4,000, that will be an expense to the city that the grant won't cover. Then we get down to park impact fees. We have budgeted $150,000, which is $80,000 more for mayor and council to approve use of the park impact fees for 2 projects. So we just want to make sure that's clear that that is to use the restricted money that's set aside for parks and recreation only. And then the last line, the budgeted use of fund balance, that's where $148,000 is needed to balance the general fund operating and capital outlay expenditures, which is down from last year, mainly because of the reallocation to the utility fund. We'll move on to expenditures on page 9. The flow of this is by department. The first department is mayor and council, and I'll pretty much just go bottom line. Mayor and council, we had an increase of $191. I will note in every category, our pension and administrative cost is up this year. It will cost about $155 for each employee who has pension versus last year, I believe it was about $148.
Who are the employees with pension?
Any permanent full-time employee who's not already in a pension system.
Which includes also city council.
And yes, and includes mayor and council. Okay, I'll move on to the finance department. Yes?
Before you leave, there are at least 2 employees that receive no benefits. I'm one. I don't get retirement from the city, and neither does our Parks and Rec director.
Is the, will the new financial position be covered under this, or is that also gonna be a position that doesn't receive the?
No, anyone who works over 500 hours who is a permanent employee must be in the retirement system unless they are already in another system. It's required. It's not an option.
Thank you.
Okay, the finance department, bottom line, it's a reduction of $131,000. With that said, the bulk of that is because of the reorganization. So 2 employees that were originally in this department will now report to the city manager under his budget, as well as the bulk of their time, 90%, has shifted over to the utility fund. 50% of the treasurer's position shift over to the utility fund. But we have budgeted in here the new part-time employee at 25 hours a week. With that said, funds that were in the finance department, those funds were either shifted to the city manager's department or the utility and water sewer billing system based on what was appropriate and the allocation. So that's why you're seeing the reduction. It's not that it was a true reduction, if you will, it was shifted somewhere else. We'll move down to the city manager. The total is $35,000 reduction, pretty much the same scenario as the finance department. Increasing by 2 employees, but only 20% of their time, and then the rest being shifted over to the water and sewer department, utility fund. Moving on to page 10, expenditures continued with the IT department. We have an increase of about $8,000. A reminder that the IT department houses all of the IT equipment except for water and sewer and the police department. And if you remember years ago, each of the departments had this in their own department, and we moved it out of our individual departments and moved it to the IT department. The bulk of the increase here is for additional software and support for the accounting system to get rid of our QuickBooks and to utilize accounts receivable in our accounting system. Next is the clerk's office, increase of $3,600. Mainly what you're seeing is the 1.5% of the COLA, health insurance increases, and the election for next year. And the election is budgeted for $3,500, so that's the bulk of the increase there. Moving on to zoning, on the bottom of page 10 over to page 11. You'll see increase of $19,000. The bulk of the increase there is fringe benefits. That pertains to an employee who wished to pick up health insurance with the city, who did not previously have it. And in addition to that, we have on page 11, it pertains to City Ordinance 10/2016, the Downtown Revitalization Act Amendment. And we have we may have some cost pertaining to that ordinance. So we budgeted for that accordingly. Then we have the Planning and Zoning Commission, a decrease of $1,400. That mainly falls in the Board of Appeals, and this is a pass-through cost. So any revenue comes in is offset. So it's really not a true expense to the city, it'll be a wash. Then we go down to code enforcement, and there's been no change there.
Just note that we budgeted an increase in the stipend the Planning and Zoning Commission gets from $20 a meeting to $30 a meeting. That hasn't been changed in the 30 years that I've been on the council, so it's about time. Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Economic development, page 11, and that goes over onto page 12. There is an increase of almost $16,000. The main line items are the Main Street program, an additional $5,000, and an additional $15,000, a new line item for a marketing initiative. And note that in previous years, there was $10,000 for something called Baltimore Street Marketing Initiative, and we've now moved that over to the zoning pertaining to that ordinance. So that's why we just lined that out. So you just know what it used to be, and now we've moved that.
Is this funds for the Shining City?
Yes, the
effort?
marketing initiative, it's budgeted $15,000 for the Shining City.
And it got moved where?
No, wait a minute,
That's still here.
that's still here. The thing that's lined through was the grants that we had, you just updated that ordinance.
The Downtown Revitalization Act.
Uh-huh.
Just moved it from
Incentives.
Nancy's over to Jim's.
But not the full
No,
amount.
I'm talking, that's not what I meant. The $10,000 that you mentioned that used to be called Baltimore, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Did that get moved somewhere?
Yes.
Baltimore Street Media Marketing.
It got moved to,
It got moved to zoning, but not as the same language. So where it was $10,000 in Nancy's, in economic development, it wasn't being utilized. So we zeroed it out. Then we moved it to zoning, and we have two line items now, one for 2,500 and one for 500. So we're only budgeting 3,000 instead of 10,000. And
And what are those two
That
systems for?
didn't,
the 2,500 pertains to the, how much investment a person does to their, what payment they would get back based on the investment they made into their property. The other one, the $500 would be, the freeze incentive payment is based on what their tax assessment is on the property.
now, I'm back to this $10,000 and how it was moved and what it's gonna be used for.
It's gonna be used for
There was
the city ordinance.
the word.
The incentive ordinance that was just modified?
Yeah, I know.
Before the money was in Nancy's,
Right.
Yeah,
It was
Now it's in
economic,
Jim's.
yeah.
And not being
Economic development.
utilized.
I'm just wondering, didn't Nancy have some other need in her budget for that? I don't even know why it was sitting there not used.
Well, we believe it was this ordinance.
Okay.
Yes, there was, that money was in there and no one made application over the number of years, so it just sat.
Okay.
So we took that 10,000 away, but we gave her 5,000 more in the Main Street program, and we gave her.
That's what I'm getting to.
Okay, and we gave her 15,000 more,
Okay.
and we named it a new line item called Marketing
Okay.
Initiative for the Shining City. So she has a total increase of 20,000.
Okay,
Okay.
that's what I was getting at.
yeah, that's on the
I
previous,
knew she needed that money in there for those different things.
that's on page 11.
And it looked like it was just being taken away.
Now, if you look at page
Okay.
11, you'll see the Main Street's got 5 more.
Okay,
See it? EDC Main Street Program
Yeah, there it is.
went from
Okay.
5 to 10.
all right.
So we'll move on to City Hall. A reduction of $2,400. That's mainly in interest expense. So the question previously, where is the interest expense for our debt? The one place it sits is right here. So that line item, 51,000 will be needed for the general fund debt interest.
And
Did everyone see that?
a question, yeah, on the City Hall. We have 27,000 for donations, right?
Yes.
25 of that is fire department.
Right.
Is the other 2 museum or
Museum,
museum plus other stuff?
no, for the museum.
Just the museum? Okay.
There's another place that we also have.
For
Donations.
miscellaneous stuff. Okay, thank you.
Then we have the City Hall Annex, that remains the same. And then we have the Roberts Mill Facility Head Start. And we did a small increase there based on the increasing maintenance and repairs that we've had to make at that facility. I'm ready to move to public safety if you all are.
Bobby Joe, where did the, I know I must be overlooking it. Where did we put the $5,000 for the gift? The, gift to the city for the toilets?
That's over in utility funds.
Okay.
Okay, public safety, police, towards the bottom of page 12. And then over to page 13. The police department have an increase of almost 14,000. Mainly that's in salaries and fringe benefits and insurance. On page 13, under police secretary, a small increase there, $1,500. mainly fringe benefits, salary, and health insurance. Crossing guard, a small reduction. We've only budgeted 480 hours.
How many hours were budgeted last year for that?
About the same. It might have been 500, but because of the retirement law and rules, I made sure it's budgeted under that.
And it's one crossing guard, is that correct?
One crossing guard,
Okay.
that's a part-time position, so there's no benefits,
And seasonal.
no retirement.
Right,
Yes, it's seasonal.
right.
Where's he at? Location? Okay.
On Kings Drive or on, okay.
And moving on to Public Works Streets Department. That goes over onto page 14. Overall, there's a reduction of 127,000. The bulk of that is the salaries, fringe benefits, et cetera, reallocation over to water and sewer. There's also reduction in maintenance and repairs, equipment purchases. We did increase snow and ice removal based on the previous 3 years. So we went ahead and increased it 25,000. And because of the tipping fees are increased, we had to increase our line item by 10,000. You'll see those two items on the top of page 14,
Yeah,
snow
the
and ice
commissioners
removal.
voted 4-1 to increase the tipping fee $2. Our commissioner voted in favor of the increase.
And so that increased our budget by 10,000. Moving on to Parks and Recreation on page 14. Overall reduction of approximately 6,000. Again, the bulk of this is mainly because of reallocation of salaries over to the Water and Sewer Fund. And you'll see increase of fringe benefits, and that's based on reallocation. So previously, we had more fringe benefits over in other departments, whether it be streets or utility fund. Now we're reallocating them into Parks and Rec, based on their hours worked for those departments.
We have a $60,000 figure for mowing. Are these mowing contracts put out for bid? Who
Yes.
does this mowing, and do we put these out regularly for bid? For mowing?
It's a 3-year contract.
Many providers? Or-
I think there were only 2 or 3 people that applied, that bid for it, right,
We're in the second year of a 3-year contract.
And,
right.
Okay, so that ends the bottom of the regular operating expenditures, and then we move into the capital outlay. And so for the capital outlay at the bottom of page 14, we have our principal payments of 109,000 for the general fund. We have the police vehicles at 65,000, and that's 2 police vehicles. We have capital outlay for the streets, and that is for the LED retrofit, but that is almost 100% grant funded. There'll probably be about 3,500 costs to the city. Then we have capital outlay for the streets of 119,000, and that's for paving of Roberts Mill Road and a couple other areas. And we will be using her money, our one-time grant that's to be used for capital projects only for that. Then we have in vehicles, a replacement vehicle for 45,000 in streets. And then we have 2 projects in parks, one for $100,000 for the Memorial Park playground replacement, and another 50,000 for the Memorial Park parking lot. And both of those, 100,000 and 15,000, that's requesting use of the park impact fees. And that's in the separate account restricted for that use only. And then bottom line, you'll see that we net to zero, but of course that is using fund balance to do so, and that's in the general fund. Any question on the detail of the general fund before we move over to the utility fund? Okay, on page 15 starts the utility fund. The format here is revenue first, and we have water and then sewer. So for water, the first line item is our water service fee, and this is where the description over to the side explains the rate increase of only 3.5% versus the 5%. So in our okay, yes. So it's a 3.5% increase, but note that this year we reduced the usage for the calculation. Based on our FY15 actual usage, we noticed that the usage is down. Therefore, we did not budget at the same usage as we did last year, which is why you're not seeing as big of an increase. And that is because we lowered the usage.
Do you have the figure for actual number of gallons of water used?
Say that again?
Actual gallons used?
Yes,
It's on here.
120,687,000. And that is in the note to the right.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. The other increase in this area is the water standpipe rental, and that's based on additional contract from AT&T, or excuse me, not AT&T, Sprint. Our capacity payments per contract will be less this year, therefore we budgeted less. And interest rates are slowly going up, so that's why we budgeted a little more interest this year for the money sitting in the savings account. So overall, the water, we're seeing 24,000 increase. The bulk of that is due to the 3.5% increase in the water rates. Then we move down to sewer. We use the same usage to calculate a 3.5% increase for that, and the net is 37,000 increase. Any questions on the revenue? I just want to point out that the line items that you're seeing zero at, where it's non-operating revenue, we didn't budget for this, but we do know revenue comes in, and that's what Henry was discussing, where at the end of the year, we want to make sure that that money gets restricted for capital projects in the future.
That's where your growth revenue comes in.
Right. So we did not include it in this operating budget, but we do know we do get additional revenue as growth. And we want to make sure that at the end of the year, at our financial statements, that's discussed before the financial statements are finalized, so we can make sure that it's restricted.
Do we at some point see a number?
On your monthly mayor and council reports, it's in there. Yes. It's under the project area is water capital and sewer capital, and you see them monthly. Okay, moving over to page 16 is just a summary of the operating revenue. And 17 starts the expenditures for the utility fund. Start with water. So with water, you'll see an increase of over 212,000. You'll notice the bulk of that is in the salaries of 120,000, and that is reallocating those salaries that we discussed about before that were in general fund. In addition to that, there are 40,000 in additional water meters and MXU batteries budgeted, and that's to replace all the needed MXUs and meters based on the issues we've been having with the estimated readings because of the batteries that need to be replaced.
Are we still estimating any readings?
Yes.
We are. I thought we were making good progress on replacing the batteries in the units.
We have.
Yeah, we're almost complete on that?
Well, and with the exception of those people who are not responding.
So you have $40,000 allocated for that.
And we're gonna see that over at least the next 2 to 3 years as the failures, the failures are going to occur. Battery life is somewhere around 10, 12 years, something of that nature. So it's gonna take us time to replace all of those batteries that we know will be failing.
Yeah, this $40,000 is looking to future failures, not past failures.
Henry, I thought we made a decision on those people that didn't respond
Yes,
to
shut them off.
shut them off.
Well, for the better part of it, I'd say that most of it that has happened. Though, the ones that are still outstanding and not responding are those homes that are in foreclosure.
Okay.
Okay.
Am I right?
Yeah, and a bulk of them are already off.
Right.
We
Yeah,
turned
I
them
just-
off.
Yeah, because I don't want to see anybody coming at us later saying, oh, it's been estimated for 3 years, you owe me this money.
Speaking of that, the county sent out a link to a website that listed all the foreclosures in the
Right.
state yesterday. Have you had a chance to look at that or
No.
to figure out if that's a value or not? It should be a
Well,
value.
it's gonna be a value, but, no, we haven't had the opportunity to really focus on other things at home.
I looked at it, but didn't have time to figure it out, so I stopped looking at it.
But you have to create a log on,
Yeah.
so I didn't set my log on up yet. And another note, the interest expense for water, you'll see 104,000, 105,000. That's the interest on the debt. The interest on the debt for the water loans.
So we're now up to 800 and some thousand total,
You're
So
getting,
far.
yes,
without counting the sewer
right,
Debt.
and we'll be getting to
sewer
that.
interest, right? Yep.
So moving on to sewer. Page 17 on to page 18. Bottom line, there's an increase of 157,000. Again, the bulk of that is in salaries and fringe benefits due to the reallocation. We were able to reduce maintenance and repairs by 17,000, gasoline prices by 2,000, legal fees by 2,000.
The gasoline thing is a real roll of the dice. Now it's low.
It's up, it's down, it's up, it's down.
And so we kind of took like a 3-year average based on that report, and we decided to go ahead and reduce this one. So then we move on to, on page 18, the capital outlay. We have the principal debt payments for water of over 249,000. The sewer principal payments on debt of over 428,000. And I forgot to mention up above, the interest expense for the sewer is over 315,000.
So did you add all three of them up?
Yeah, I have all of them.
We're up about 1.2 or so. No.
And it'll be that for the next couple of years, approximately that, principal and interest. So it's 1,259,306,000 debt, principal, and interest needed for FY17. That was 1,259,306. That's general fund and utility fund combined.
Yep, thank you.
That's a piece of change.
Big piece of change.
The other capital outlay on page 18 is the water and billing system. That project will not be complete by June 30th, so we added $7,500 to FY17 to complete that project. The sewer project, $120,000 to replace 200 linear feet of clay pipe on Commerce Street. $32,000 for equipment and sewer to replace a sewer jetter. $19,500 to replace SBR mixer and float, and $22,500 to replace the Windy Hill lift station panel box, etc. So once we take our revenue, our expenditures, and our capital outlay, including our principal, interest, and debt payment, it leaves us with a surplus of approximately $13,000 without including growth. So we know we will be receiving more revenue, we just don't know what that number is, and we'll want to restrict that. Any questions on the utility fund, revenue, expense, capital?
Thank
But
you.
I must compliment you on the budget.
Appreciate that.
Good job.
Yeah, I agree. It's not an easy thing to do, and it involves a lot of detail. I guess, what you got on the last page is the schedule.
Well, the next step will be on our regular council meeting night, April the 11th, where we will introduce this budget. And the constant yield tax notice will be published that week. And then our public hearing will be on May the 4th, which is our workshop night, for any final changes that need to be made. We adopt the budget on May the 9th.
Such goes the
Mayor of
circle.
New Windsor told me of Union Bridge told me last night they've increased their
Yeah.
water rates by 3%, right?
Yep,
Union Bridge did?
Sewer rates and their
both of them, 3%.
tax base rates.
And
5
tax. Water, sewer, and tax all increase.
In Union Bridge?
Union Bridge.
Any questions, folks?
Well, I have one question about, I see that we have a COLA in this budget for everybody but us.
Oh. Well,
I'd like to begin that
Whatever.
conversation for whatever FY it is. It wouldn't take effect till 17.
right, that's the discussion, quite frankly, you guys have got to have, and there is a limit, if you should decide to give yourselves a raise, then that would not be effective until the next election.
Right, it wouldn't be part of this budget.
That's what I'm
Right.
trying to get straight. It's not part of this
No.
budget. I just want the conversation to begin.
Why don't, it won't hurt us to do some investigation. Why don't we just investigate our neighbors and see how we stand and compare, and then we can make a decision based on what we find.
Okay.
I'd be in favor of that.
And I would look at Carroll and Frederick municipalities primarily,
Frederick as well?
yeah.
Well, they're gonna be making more money.
Well, the municipalities in Frederick County, not Frederick City itself.
Well,
No, I'm speaking of similar-sized communities.
right, well, you're
Vermont,
right, because I do
Brunswick.
know that there are some of them in Frederick.
Middletown, something like that.
They don't take any, some of them don't take salaries at all.
Does anyone else care to bring anything else up this evening? In that case, we could entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Thank you, folks, for your attention tonight.
An hour and 10
And thank you, staff, because that was a
A lot of work done.
good budget. Henry, kidding
Well,
a little bit about the red pen. Well, I worked on them pretty good. I really did.
He went through 3 or 4 red pens on this one.
We had to kind of get a little bit of a little vein, get some more red blood.
Yeah.
But,
Always my favorite time of the year.
in general, my comment on this thing is this is one of
Well,
the.
It
better
worked
ones
out
we've had
very
in-
well.
Yeah, it did.
I feel as comfortable with this budget as any budget I've worked on. Well, that's true.
Right. We've got no growth, we've got, there's just so much pluses in this at this time.
And it's,
Less money coming out of, our, fund balance.
that to me is the big thing. We're, in the 9 years that I've been around,
That's, yeah,
we haven't,
finally.
finally,
We
that's
can
right.
cut, and, the other thing is we've also stopped bleeding from the general fund, from supporting the, fund to the utility,
And not increasing the debt. That's a,
which, like I
When are you gonna
said,
pay it back? Not gonna happen, huh? So when are you gonna pay it back?
well,
You're from, when are you gonna start paying it back?
One thing at a time, Joe.
Yeah.
Oh, it's only 2.4 million, so.
well, it's like, my initial comment, that report is definitely working.
Right.
It's the first time we've actually seen a surplus in the utility fund. Yeah, even before we started those projects, let's put it that way.
Right.
oh, yeah.
Oh, Brad, by the way,
Yes, sir.
artichokes for me.
Don't like those, no. You're not a fan of artichokes, huh?
No,
As I say, even a blind squirrel
past
finds
summer.
out occasionally.
And all the work you had to get to.
Even a blind squirrel finds out what it is.
That came out Monday night before the planning and zoning, didn't it?
I gave
I think
Joe
someone
a,
made a comment about that.
Right. And that's what reminded
description
me.
of a
No, it was
trip down
downstairs in
Hartford,
Henry's office,
So he
that's
could
right,
read
it
his
was.
bucket
Right.
list.
There we go.
Oh,
And I told him he can take you along.
I would be happy to
Well,
go back.
one thing
I really would. That was really
Glad to
one
see is
of.
that
Hey,
the.
Joe, show him the trip.
Oh, I'm gonna show him.
I'm ready to go. Okay, just schedule
One
it
of the
in.
things that I'm
Back
glad
to
about is that
I
the
would go back.
projected water and sewer rate is less
It's
than
only
what
about
it was
Than what
supposed
it
to
could be.
14, 15
be. Right.
K.
And that makes me happy.
now wait a minute. I got